How's it going, guys? Second vlog for today. Still May 24th, 9:36 p.m. here on the East Coast. So I'm gonna do this second vlog about. I had an interesting conversation with a lady who came into our place, and it was about. Let me see. I wrote it down here on my phone. Give me 1 second. I just want to. It was also something I learned in the military. So setting rules, boundaries, and limitations. And she said that this is very important to do at a young age, um, and something she did with all her grandchildren and children as well, and that it has helped um, take care of certain things in her life and just made her life when it came to her kids and grandkids just a little bit easier. Because every time they came into the house, they'd have rules, boundaries, and limitations as to what they could and couldn't do, or could and couldn't touch, because she has a lot of valuables in her house, from what I was gathering. And that was a very interesting way to approach it. I told her that I might think about doing something similar like that to my daughter. But I like to think of my house for my daughter as a place to where she can hang out, have fun, and do some things that aren't necessarily allowed in other places. And just because it is her house, we tend to do things in our own homes that we don't necessarily do out in other places. So I think instilling certain rules, boundaries, and limitations within the home is absolutely necessary, but not necessarily. They don't have to be as strict as the rules that follow out and about. Like some people like to walk around in their house in their underwear, and that wouldn't necessarily, or less than that, that wouldn't necessarily be acceptable out there within the regular community. So I did find the conversation rather interesting. Setting rules, boundaries, and limitations will help keep some sort of orderly conduct within your home, but making sure that those rules, boundaries, and limitations are kind of tailored to the individual. Obviously, if you have a more responsible individual, somebody who requires less instruction, I think there should be less rules, boundaries, and limitations, and maybe some opportunity for more freedom. That's just my thoughts on it. And a person who requires a little bit more attention, maybe you should have more rules, boundaries, and limitations to get them to adhere so they know exactly what to expect. But it was an interesting conversation that I did have with her, and one that I thought might help uh, young parents out, and young people out today. Set your own rules, boundaries, and limitations for yourself. Things you can and can't do, things you should and shouldn't do. And once you have those fully instilled within yourself, then you can probably pass them on down to your kids. But again, you have to, um, I would say, tailor it to the individual. No two kids are identical, and even identical kids tend to be very different. In my experience, no two personalities are the same. Sometimes you have similar personalities, but you can always find something to differentiate the two personalities. So, very interesting stuff to consider, very interesting stuff to talk about. But give me your thoughts on it. I'm going to try to keep the next couple vlogs short because I do have a couple more to put up. But setting rules, boundaries, and limitations. Do you think that they do help you? Especially, our topic was more of kids and grandkids, or do you think they hurt you? I know that uh, in my experience, especially dealing with a cousin that I have that went to school at NYU, she had rules, boundaries, and limitations more so with her mom than she did with her dad, which was my uncle. But his rules, boundaries, and limitations were a little more laxed. And I think that that differentiates from parent to parent as well, depending on your upbringing. Um, and she turned out to be a wonderful person who just recently graduated. Congratulations to her. Kennedy is her name. But I noticed their parenting style was very different, but when it came to rules, boundaries, and limitations, the mom did instill certain things, like bringing home good grades and things of that nature, and if she didn't, there would be consequences. And then the dad was way more on the relaxed side. I remember he told me when she was younger, he would, the story that sticks out of my head, he would let her walk around freely and just follow her. even if it were into crowds of people at a very young age, even when she first started walking, he'd follow her just to kind of see where her mind went, where she'd end up going, like the logical thought process that went through somebody just being able to learn how to walk at a very young age would want to go to. And I try to implement both of those things. So I don't like to be extreme on either side. I don't like too much extreme freedom, although it is something that I fought for. But I do think that freedom is controlled to a certain extent. You can't necessarily act in complete freedom and do whatever it is you want, like hurt people and things of that nature. And then I don't believe on being very stringent as well. One of the things I brought up in the topic of conversation with this lady was unconditional love, that I find that most important whenever raising my daughter is unconditional love. Doing good, bad, or indifferent things, always show her love. And that's one of the things that I work on as an individual, as a parent, and something that I want to push out there to the information that I've gotten from some very educated people. You know, having unconditional love for your kids, whether they do good, bad, or indifferent things, will really set the tone for the future. And it's one of the hardest things, believe it or not, to do, is have that unconditional love, not overreact when it comes to certain things. And if you can provide that to your kids, or even to your spouse, it's very tricky to do the spouse thing. I'll get into probably something about that a little bit later. But when it comes to the kids, having that unconditional love is a very interesting, very challenging thing to do. A lot of people say that they do it, but trust me when I tell you, it's a lot easier said than done. You really have to be conscious of what's coming out of your mouth and your actions and reactions towards your kids, and think about unconditional love first, and then think about your reaction. And it's just one of those things that it just takes time to develop that practice and do those things. But it is one of the topics that I brought up while I was talking to her. Whenever it does come to rules, boundaries, limitations, I do tend to think of unconditional love first, and what would I do for that child to show them love through the action or inaction that I take. So all good stuff here. I appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. I do believe I'm at around 65 subscribers. Still trying to get to 75 before the end of the month. Was my goal for last month. But I never got a chance to put up the video reflection of last month. But that's okay. Sometimes there's just good information to put out. So appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and everything alike. And I'll see you guys on the next one.